to the Culinary Saijiki podcast. My name is Allison Whipple, and twice a month I'll bring you a conversation with a fellow haiku practitioner about the way that food and the seasons show up in their haiku practice. Visit www.culinarysaijiki.com to listen to the podcast, read long-form essays on these topics, and sign up to join the podcast conversation. You can also support the project at buymeacoffee.com/culinarysaijiki. Enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 9. It is a chilly night in St. Louis. We might get a freeze tonight, according to the weather report. And after walking my dog, I have to say I believe them. I have even gone so far as to turn my heat on. First off, a big thank you to Lorraine for buying me 3 coffees. I am making some serious progress on getting my web hosting covered for the year. If you want to contribute, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/culinarysaijiki and contribute whatever you want. Every little bit helps. And this week's guest, M.A. Dubs, has shared some recipes for the supporter bonus that's going to go out later this week. So be on the lookout for that if you are a supporter. And if you're not yet, hey, the time is now. Anyway, I was super excited that she shared those, and I think you will enjoy them as well. And if you can't support the podcast, just listen. I do this for fun. I just enjoy making this show. So whatever you want to do. If you do want to find other ways to support, sharing it out on social media or wherever you share your podcasts is appreciated. Over on the blog, the most recent post is about dining together, haiku that explore the various aspects of food and togetherness in pretty dynamic ways. All right, so as I mentioned, M.A. Dubs is my guest today, another Midwestern poet, and I just loved our conversation. We recorded online. It is still definitely super echoey in my house. Packing is going slowly, but we did record, and I actually recorded 2 shows in one day. It was super fun, but I loved our conversation. And we talked about haiku, but I really appreciated the way that our conversation veered off into other topics in a really organic way. I don't script these episodes very much, and really the way this conversation turned out, that's part of the reason for it, because I don't think it would have evolved the same way if I'd carefully written out all of my questions. So thanks to M.A. for coming on. I hope you enjoy this talk as much as I enjoyed recording it. M.A. Dubs is an award-winning Mexican-American and LGBT poet from Indiana. Dubs has been writing and publishing her writing for over a decade and has been featured in literary journals, anthologies, and zines around the world. This year, she served as a judge for Indiana's Poetry Out Loud state competition and performed several readings across her state. When not writing, Dubs enjoys gardening, hiking, running, mushroom foraging, or spending time with her twin girls, husband, and pets. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And you can probably hear my pet clacking around on my hardwood floors. So I was reading your bio and I'm like, oh, I hear her coming in strong from the mic. So that's
You're okay. I kicked everybody out of the house. I was like, you must all get out. I need a quiet house. So.
Yeah. Well, even if I took her upstairs, you would actually just hear her going clomp, clomp, clomp. She is a small dog with just the heaviest paws I've ever heard.
I understand that.
Anyway, you want to go read your first 2 haiku?
Yes. Sweet pink tamales, steaming out of their corn husk, dessert heritage. Sweet pink tamales, steaming out of their corn husk, dessert heritage. Abuelita melts in masa and cinnamon, hot pan dulce dip. Abuelita melts in masa and cinnamon, hot pan dulce dip.
I'm very curious what a pink tamale is because I am familiar with tamales. I have never seen like dessert pink tamales. I'm used to in Texas. I mostly just saw the savory tamales that you would have at dinner. So can you? I'm just very curious. What is a pink tamale?
Oh, yes. So there's obviously the savory ones I think most people are familiar with,
Hmm.
but there's also a branch of dessert tamales. It can be a lot of different things. Some are, kind of like corn-based. The pink tamales is what I'm most familiar with. So the pink usually comes from a dye or something like that.
Hmm.
And it can have lots of different flavors. So it can have pineapple flavors in there. They can have raisins in there. Usually there's some cinnamon and things like that, and it's very delicious. So I would definitely give them a try.
No, that sounds delicious. And was because I'm turning to the word heritage in the third line.
Mhm.
Was the making of tamales like a holiday tradition in your family? How does the heritage come in there?
Yeah, so for my heritage, I'm Hispanic. My grandfather was born and raised in Mexico, and part of our tradition, it would kind of depend. We'd have days where we would make traditional Mexican food. Typically, that was enchiladas. When I was younger, there would be things like tamales that were made. As my grandmother's health kind of went down, we didn't make those as much. Um, but a few years ago, I tried to surprise my grandpa during Christmas. So I found a recipe online for pink tamales, and I brought him in for that Christmas, and it was just really cool to see his reaction because he was like, "I haven't had these since I was a kid back in Mexico," and that was just really cool to bring something special for him because I know he misses his parents even after all this time. So it's just great to have, I don't know, food and recipes bring a connection to the family, and link back my heritage for my ancestors, some that I, met when I was a kid and some that I never met too.
Yeah, and I think it's um, food really does connect us in meaningful ways. And one of the things I think about a lot is how so often sort of food cultures and what we might think of as traditional has had to change because
Mhm.
of availability of ingredients in a place where an immigrant community has set up. So I think like a lot
Yes.
about Tex-Mex food and how it's Mexican, but it's different from interior Mexican. But it's not because it's um, not authentic. It's just it's authentic to where it's from, and where it's from, you couldn't get culantro, but you could get cilantro. You couldn't necessarily get crema, but you could get sour cream. You couldn't get the same cuts of meat or like beef or pork, and you just had to work with what you had. And so out of that,
Mhm.
um, new traditions are born. And I think I feel super lucky that we can live in a world where it is relatively easy to honestly like get so many of the things you need to make something that is a little more traditional, and you can really give that to your parents or your grandparents.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely agree. We kind of refer to ourselves as Mexibillies for our mixed heritage. My grandmother, she was born and raised in Alabama, so we would jokingly call ourselves Mexibillies because we have this kind of mixed culture and trying to balance, our Hispanic heritage, but also like the Southern heritage and Jewish heritage, and we have just lots of different heritages and things like that. So, trying to find a balance, and you do have that kind of fusion of cultures that comes together, not just in a person, but also in the food that we serve when we, gather around and we meet for holidays or just whenever.
I mean, even in the tamale itself, I haven't gotten to taste a Delta tamale yet, but a Delta tamale comes out of the deep South, and what it emerged out of what happened when basically Black communities and sort of Latinx communities merged, and like so a whole like deep South tamale was born, and I look forward to eating one someday.
That sounds great. Yes, me too.
The abuelita melts haiku. I put those together because it's also a dessert poem.
Yes.
But it's so funny. I think I read it differently. There's two ways to read this, and I think you have to know what abuelita means. So,
Yes.
um, abuelita, the chocolate
Mhm.
melting.
Yeah.
For those of y'all who don't know, abuelita is a brand of chocolate for uh, dips, Mexican hot chocolate, things like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but abuelita is also the word for grandmother. So the first time I read this, I actually pictured like your grandmother standing at the stove, melting st- just melting things all together.
Yes.
So I took like a more grammatical standpoint, and I'm like, but that doesn't really make sense. Like the cinnamon's not going to melt. So like, so the first time I read it, I actually pictured a grandmother
Mhm.
doing just um actually melting it, when actually then I reread it. I'm like, oh no, that's you're referring to the chocolate.
Well, I kinda wanted to play for both too. So, one, the Abuelita chocolate literally, carefully melting and making sure you don't burn it and things like that, but then also just, I don't know, the fusion between, um, my family, the matriarchs in my family, and how that love, also blended into the food that they created us. It's very interesting because from my grandmother, like I said, she was raised in the South, but she did most of the cooking, and she learned, the recipes and things like that, and she loved cooking, and she did very great cooking as well for lots of different things, whether it's tamales or enchiladas or things like that. But it's just kind of like that blend between like her as a person, but then also, of course, the delicious chocolate too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, is abuelita your favorite brand of chocolate?
I'm kind of torn. So Abuelita is like owned like by Nestle.
It
When I was looking
is.
it up and things like that, I was like, oh no, not Nestle.
Yeah, no.
But it is. I have that connection to, which I think they do it on purpose, because you have like that box with,
Mhm.
you got the grandmother sitting on there and things like that, and I'm like, I do kind of connect it to my grandma, and the chocolate melt things too. So, and it is a good melting chocolate.
It is.
When you're making Mexican hot chocolate, or for the recipe here is,
Yeah.
champorado, I should say. So
I'm partial to Popular, but then I'm like, oh my god, am I even going to be able to get that in St. Louis where I live now? Like, it's weird because first of all, St. Louis is like the intersection of the Midwest and the South,
Mhm.
um, and also I'm just like I love it here, but I also just have taken for granted, like, sure, I can get my first of all, that I have a preferred brand of like Mexican melting chocolate, like girl from Cleveland. But then I've just taken for granted that that is a thing that I can easily get. And I'm like, oh, I might just like have to switch to Bolita, which I mean, it's perfectly lovely, but we all have our preferences. I'm like,
Yes.
oh God, Abuelita might be just the only thing I can get here.
Right.
As it is hard to find my most favorite hot sauce, which is Valentina. And there's plenty of Cholula around here, so that's good. But
Nice.
again,
I am partial. There's a hot sauce that has my namesake. It's called, Melinda's hot sauce, and I
hmm,
am a big fan of that. So,
I'll have to look out for that.
yes.
All right, do you want to move on to your next two?
Yes. All right. Sweet pan de muerto, tan conchas on ofrenda, pastries guide you home. Sweet pan de muerto, tan conchas on ofrenda, pastries guide you home. Butternut squash soup, roasted with green pumpkin seeds, a warm harvest taste. Butternut squash soup, roasted with green pumpkin seeds, a warm harvest taste.
And so many of your haiku really, I group these out, but they really all just work together so well because there is so much of the heritage in there. And I really appreciate that you um, use the actual Spanish words for foods. 'Cause what else would you use, right? um, but it can be, I think, especially in like really short poetry like haiku. The challenge of occasionally having to write bilingually can really come up. How does I'm curious because my grandfather was first generation Italian, and he I I think he never really spoke Italian. Like his parents would only speak Italian when they didn't want him to know what he was saying.
Yes.
So like I know all of the Italian words for foods, but I don't really
Right.
know the Italian words for many other things. But I'm
Yeah.
really curious, like, was the Spanish language, and if this is too personal, we can cut it or
Oh, no,
whatever.
you're good.
But I'm always super curious, like, how did uh, language show up, like, through your family, and was it like largely through food, which is really how it showed up for us. Like, my Italian pronunciation is great if I have to talk about pasta, but other
Right.
than that, like,
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, it's a really interesting story. I think a lot of immigrant families experience the same. So my grandfather, he came over and he came and lived in the region, Chicago area, when he was like 11 or 12. And during that time there was a big emphasis on blending in. Um, and there was a big loss of heritage and also a loss of heritage that happened too. Um, and then for my mother and my aunts, they did not grow up speaking Spanish. The biggest focus is on speak English so we can blend in, um, and that your English will sound really good too. And then with that, there was a lot of loss as well. So a lot of us learn Spanish through Spanish classes like in school, um, but typically when Spanish was spoken, it would be something, like you said, related to food, specifically. Um, and that's how there was a little bit of that language that was kept there and that culture. But I do know for my generation, so for me and my sister, my cousins, there's trying to reclaim the language, but also the culture that comes with that. And then also balancing, like I said, the rest of our heritage and grew up in, the Midwest and Indiana and things like that, and how accessible things are, has not always been true. There's a lot more stuff I see now for, Day of the Dead, which I think is really cool and it makes it more accessible that we can kind of connect with our community more as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I think our grandparents and great grandparents did that because that's how you survived. But I know I feel like my mother has sort of at times expressed something like akin to a real grief that she like feels sort of disconnected
Yes.
from um, her her Italianness. Um, and I often like feel that as well. Like I'd like to connect to my culture in ways that other than food. My family wasn't super religious, so I don't have any like religious heritage to really connect to there either. But it is, yeah, just the availability of things, even for Italian cooking, has changed a lot. Like I remember, we always like I remember my grandfather would like make a vinaigrette dressing, and there would be like fresh garlic. And I remember like it being the 90s, and like people were like, oh, garlic breath. Like they sell those special like mints so like you wouldn't have garlic breath, and like garlic was the worst thing like that you could
Oh,
eat. And I'm just like like that's weird. And I'm just one of those like I mean, like my partner will easily put like a whole head of garlic in sauce.
yeah, yes, I'll put it
Yeah.
with just whole clothes, I will eat it, yes.
Yeah, and so you certainly like I'd say people of Italian ancestry have been considered white for a while, and still at the same time, uh, like garlic was terrible. And even thing like I just remember like when you could get extra virgin olive oil like in the suburbs. Like we used to have to drive into Cleveland to the Italian grocery store where like like the sons work there now, like own it. They probably own it now, and like they're like my age, and I'm like, oh, I've been like seeing you since like we were like gawky teenagers. So tell me about your well, what is your favorite way to make butternut squash soup? There are so many
Oh, that's
ways.
a good question. I'm really partial to things in my Instapot or in a slow cooker,
Hmm.
just
Oh
because I
yeah.
really like putting everything in one pot.
Hmm.
It just makes cleanup easier.
Yes.
So anything that involves that is great. uh, Yeah, that's actually more of a recent thing. So my husband and I were really into gardening. Um, and we had this thing where we would just like we would see seeds, we're like, oh, let's grow that. That sounds so cool. And then at the end of the season, you have like a whole bunch of stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, now we need to figure out lots of different ways to use zucchinis,
Mhm.
or all these tomatoes, gallons of tomatoes, or butternut squash and things like that. So we've had to get creative and find different recipes online. So butternut squash soup, butternut squash mac and cheese, and then for zucchini, it was funny when my parents would come over during the summer, and I'd be like, "Ooh, I made brownies and bread and stuff like that." And like, hold up, like, what's in here? Like, is there some vegetable in here? And I'm like, actually, yes, there's five. I gotta put them somewhere. So enjoy your zucchini brownies.
Mm.
So
I mean, something about zucchini and chocolate is just, um,
yes.
uh, my partner's mother this week brought over a zucchini chocolate cake, and
Hmm.
oh, like, and I'm not sure what the she hasn't sent me the recipe yet, but I think there was like ginger and molasses in there too because it tasted like a chocolate gingerbread cake in a really interesting way. It was so good.
Oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, there's something about it.
Yeah,
It really, I don't know. You think it wouldn't work because it's like kind of a stringy,
yeah,
vegetable, but it really does. It adds a lot of moisture, but then also like texture as well.
yeah.
So, especially for, I mean, cakes and brownies and things like that, it's so versatile. And then of course you can fry it up, and it just works so well and everything.
The problem is if you plant it, you get. Although I weirdly the one year I had a vegetable garden, I got 0 zucchini. You either get 0 or more than you can handle.
That's what we had this year. So previous years we usually have more than we can handle, and like we're just like passing it out to neighbors and things like that. It's like, "Hey, you like this? You will now." But this year we had a rough start with our zook, and it produced one zucchini and then just literally died. I was like, "Okay."
Super,
So, but
yeah,
it's hit or miss every year for the garden.
yeah.
So, you one year everything's abundant, and the next year it's like, "Okay, I did nothing different." So, okay.
Oh yeah, the year that I had a vegetable garden, and did I say just it was just the one year. I had a wildflower garden for years, and then in pandemic year, like everyone, I'm like, I guess I have a vegetable garden now. Um, and then my landlord sold the house I was in, and I had to
Oh,
move to an apartment. Anyway, and now we have a house that doesn't have a yard.
ah,
But it's got a parking pad that we just that's our like grilling patio spot.
right.
I mean, I'm not super sad that I don't have to like maintain a yard, honestly.
That's
Um,
true.
but
You could always
the
do container gardening or something,
Yeah,
so
I probably will because I have like container plants. Um, but the year I had this garden, it was so hit or miss. Like I had so many, I had so many jalapenos that the guy who came to cut my lawn, he would just like, "Can I take some?" And I'm like, take as many as you want."
yes.
Um, but then like none of my other peppers worked at all. I had so many Japanese eggplants. I had a butternut squash that flowered and flowered and flowered, but no actual squashes. I
Yes.
had one cucumber, and I was just like, "What is happening?" And John, my partner, who grew up on a farm, he's like, "Look, you can do everything right, and some years it just
Mhm.
doesn't happen." It's kind of like writing poems, honestly. Like you can do all of the workshops and all of the drafts, and sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I definitely. I think there's some I put them, like, in like, I call it, like, purgatory, so there's, like, a file I have on my computer that's like, "You might be salvageable," and I'm trying to, like, do CPR on 'em and things like that, and then they may end up in the graveyard, and I actually had that recently where I went through the graveyard, I'm like, I pulled a couple out and I was able to save them, and then some I'm like, "No, like, you I don't think any amount of workshopping can help you."
Yeah, I haven't done that system with my haiku yet. With my more free verse poems, I'm definitely like a purger. Like, and I know people who are just like, how like no, I could never do that. But to me, it's like I believe if a poem has not come together in 5 years, it's not going to come together. That's just me.
Yeah.
Um, and I haven't really been doing that with haiku since I got serious about it. But now it's like I think once I get a little more settled, like, and I get my desk actually set up, which is going to be super exciting. I'm going to actually go and have that system and have like and have that and like start just some of my haiku. I'm just like, you're not going to work, so it's time to let you go.
Yes, kill your darlings.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to I know some people, again, it goes both ways. But for me, to me, I find there's something creatively valuable in just saying, nope, just hit that delete key and like let it go. And, it's a little 3-line poem. It's not, it's not necessarily sacred. And, just because it's on your hard drive, I think there is something creatively freeing about just saying, you know what, nope, delete off my hard drive. I've freed up, I don't know, 5 kilobytes or whatever, but that's like 5 like fresh kilobytes for something else.
Yes. Yeah, out with the old and with the new. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have never, for years I held on to stuff, and then when I first moved from Cleveland to Texas, I just purged all of my high school and college notebooks, and then I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Mhm.
And then I was like, actually, that was kind of great. And so I have definitely been a creative purger ever since.
Yes. I actually did something similar. I had a, not great sci-fi fantasy, novel I was working on all throughout high school, and it was
Weren't we
not
all?
good. It was like a self-insert character and things like that. It was not great. And then I got rid of it. It was like 200 pages, and I just got rid of it, and people were like, "What? You could salvage." I'm like, "No, no." It was more just about the experience of writing and having fun and,
Yeah.
make way for better things. I do mostly poetry, but a little bit of short fiction here and there, so
In high school, I have always mostly written poetry, but in high school I definitely had reams of handwritten friend fiction in a one of those 5-star notebooks
Yes.
with the super durable covers. Yes.
Yes, yes. I think it's a rite of passage. You kinda have, like, that I don't know, that teen cringy, that fan fiction self-insert. It's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, okay,
Yeah.
this will never see the light of day."
Yeah. It's good. I think it helps you get over yourself a little bit.
Yeah, and the rest of life helps with that too, so
Oh, so it does.
very humbling experience, yes.
Indeed. All right. You want to read your last two?
Yes. Wood fire oven, sugar-coated hot pecans, nutty smell of fall. Wood fire oven, sugar-coated hot pecans, nutty smell of fall. Cloves and nutmeg in, a warm palate of apples, first autumn cider. Cloves and nutmeg in, a warm palate of apples, first autumn cider.
Definitely bringing the fall vibes here. I love sugared pecans so much.
Yes, we made both of these this week.
Mm.
I made sugar pecans. I was talking about how they have so many different names. People call them like, oh, toasted pecans or sugar pecans, and lots of different names. I was like, it's funny how there's so many different names for it. Because I offered some to friends like, oh, it's this. I'm like, okay, everyone's calling it something different. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah. Do you have a wood fired oven?
No, I wish.
I'm like your house, your homeowner's insurance must be terrible.
Right. No, I'm definitely into the homesteader vibe, but that's future goals. I picture myself, with like long silver hair, kind of witchy, and I have like a wood fire grill or wood fire oven in the middle of nowhere, and a garden, and making medicines and things like that. That is my retirement goals. So
My reach, well, two reach dreams that I don't think are ever going to materialize. One is I always wanted a clawfoot bathtub, um, which I
yes.
just don't think is going to work in my bathroom, unfortunately. But it's a great house, and you couldn't throw away the whole house on. I will never be able to fit a clawfoot bathtub in here.
Right.
That is not a reasonable decision to make.
You seem so fancy though.
I know. I mean, honestly, maybe I'll just get one as like furniture and just lounge in it. And just fill it with
That would be
pillows and
great.
lounge. And like, honestly, that's probably what's gonna happen.
Make it a reading nook or something.
Brilliant
Fill it
idea I
with, like,
just had.
pillows.
But my other thing is a dream of having one of those big outdoor brick pizza ovens.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That is definitely just, I don't know. So it seems like it would make the pizza just taste so much better
I
too.
believe it does. I when we were house hunting, in this the first time we were in this visiting the neighborhood, we eventually ended up buying, and we looked at a place that was just like, it's going to be too much work. It's really cool, but it's going to be too much work. The previous owner had just made some poor decisions trying to renovate it, and it's like we're just going to have to undo all this. Ugh. But across the street was another. There are a ton of mixed use buildings around here. So our duplex actually it's technically a mixed use building. It used to be like the first floor used to be a bar and a photography gallery
Oh,
and other things. But this first place we looked at, it was really cool, but we're just like we don't want to live in a construction site. But like just
right.
across the street was an old pizza restaurant that was up for sale, and it was a mixed use building, but there was a big old pizza
Mhm.
oven in the back, and I'm like, I want that, and it was like it is $500,000, and I'm like that is still a better value than a $500,000 house in Austin where I used to live.
Right.
But it was like I guess we can't spend $500,000 on a house with a pizza oven. Or if we could.
Yes, yes. To be fair, I'm gonna assume the houses in Austin didn't have the big pizza oven either, so
No. They were also like a third the size of the house that we have for 3 times the price. So,
Oh my
yeah,
goodness. Ooh,
it was sad. Anyway,
yes.
um, I in the second haiku with the warm palette of apples,
Mhm,
I'm like I love the word palette here because I know that palette and palette are two different words. They're spelled differently. They mean different things, but they sound the same. And
mhm,
so like we can think of palette like the color palette, like in all of
mhm.
the like the range of like green to red to like all of the colors of apples in between. There, some are a little more red, some are a little more green, some are golden. Um,
Yes.
I love a golden delicious apple. I think that's my favorite. We've got the whole like range of spectrum of colors of apples, but then we have like the I can also think of like the palette of apples
Mhm.
that like they all just like when they're like a whole bunch of them comes in. Like I think of at the orchard my parents used to take us to that where you could watch the big cider press operating and you would just see these like stacked pallets of apples of
Oh
beautiful colorful
goodness.
apples in the fall.
That so there was like this giant, press? That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean it was the whole thing was it was a working apple orchard. It was probably other like they probably had other stuff too, but like it was a thing you could go. You
Wow.
could pick apples. You could
Mhm.
go into the shop, and there was a worker there with a giant apple peeler, just like peeling. And yeah,
Yes.
you couldn't literally go in the press room, but it was
Mhm.
like in like where if you go into like I don't know like a brewery or something where you can like see into things, and so you could actually see in and like you could actually see them like pressing things out like on a big old fashioned press, and then you could look
Oh,
in and
wow.
see where it was being made. They can't let the populace in there because
Yes.
safety. But you could see the whole process, and it was so cool. And I definitely cherish that. And that's making me think that I'm back in a place where there are apples grow. Like I could probably get some decent apple cider again. That's not a thing I've been able to get for the last couple decades.
Yes. Yes. That's a great thing about the Midwest. We have a place we go to, a U Pick, place, and it's an orchard. They unfortunately we can't see the press or anything they do. I know they make, like, their own applesauce, which is absolutely delicious, and they make a lot of different things on site, but um, it's just really cool to see the different varieties, and they have just some different stuff I don't see in stores. They have, like, King's David, and they have, like, a Jonathan, and they're
Oh
just
yeah, I haven't seen those in forever. Those are great.
I know they're so good. They're so good and they're so sweet.
Mhm.
And then just like the different varieties too. Like I had one of the grocery stores near us, they have like a no food waste thing they do. So we got like just these huge boxes of apples and we had like some purple apples in there too. And my kids were like they're like 4 and they're like, "There's purple apples?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
So, it's just really cool to have all the different tastes, but then all the different colors that come out too, the different textures, the different tastes, and who likes what kind of apple too.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
some of them are like, "Oh, my kids like Macintosh and things like that," and I'm like, "Ah, Golden Delicious is really good," and of course, Jonathan, like I mentioned too.
Yeah.
So, yes.
All right. Well, we're coming up on our on our half hour, but I do, before I ask you for any last thoughts, since we are talking about all the fall flavors, and this is a food related podcast, are you a pumpkin pie person or are you an apple pie person?
Oh, definitely pumpkin pie. I like the custard pies.
Yeah.
I do like some filled pies and things like that, but like apple pie is gonna be, lower tier.
Yeah.
So I have like tiers when it comes to the fruit pies. So I'd say like blackberry pie is probably of
Yeah.
the top, and cherry pie is pretty good, but like S tier's gonna be like blackberry pies when it comes to fruit pie. But overall, custard pies, yeah,
The way to go.
pumpkin pie hands down. So
Absolutely.
hot, cold, whipped cream, ice cream, it's all good.
Yeah.
So
It was such especially in the, more restrictive pandemic years when it would just be me and my partner on Thanksgiving, and I love pumpkin pie, and he's like, I'll eat a piece. And so then I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'll make this whole pumpkin pie kind of just for me.
I mean, more for you though. So
Oh yeah, that is true. My by the way, my secret is, if you and you can have a pre-made crust, you can make your own, it doesn't matter, but before you pour the filling in,
Mhm.
food process up some pecans and some ginger snaps, and like layer that in the crust in the bottom,
Ooh,
and then pour the custard filling in. Love it.
that is great. So then you have a season, yeah, some sort of
You got like a little like
ingredient.
gingery nutty crunch in the very bottom. Yeah.
Yes. I love all the shenanigans you can do with crust. I made a key lime pie, but I made the crust out of like golden Oreos. It was
Ooh,
ridiculous, but it was really good.
that sounds really good.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, do you have any final thoughts on haiku, on food, on poetry in general that you would like to share with the listeners today?
I don't necessarily think I have any thoughts. I just appreciate being on, and I just appreciate having um, the space to share. One, I mean, writing about food is just, I mean, heavenly. One of the best things ever. But especially with haiku, and I also like being able to have discuss in a very short framework so many different layers of food, of recipes, of culture, of heritage, and things like that. Um, and I want to see more writing of it. I want to see more people sharing their personal culture and heritage through, haiku,
Mhm.
of course, but I mean, any other, free verse or other writing style too. So I just want to encourage people to keep writing.
Well, and if you, I don't know if you're familiar with the online journal Failed Haiku, but I think it was in March they did a whole food themed
Ooh.
issue. So I'll try to remember to link to that in the show notes. I had this whole goal of, because the way I organized the blog part of this project is I read journals, and like I type up haiku, and I and I categorize it. And someday I'm like, I'm going to transcribe all of that journal, all that whole food issue, and I'm like, I have not had time to sit down and transcribe
Right.
the whole Failed Haiku food issue yet.
Yes.
But everyone should read it. It's fantastic.
Yes, I would love to check it out.
Yeah, I'll try to link to it. I just have to remember what month it was published in. 2021. Wait, it's 2023. 2023 has been a crazy year.
Oh, you're a year ahead. It's 2022 still.
Oh my God, is it only 2022? I don't really exist in time.
You are a time lord, that's been confirmed.
I think my 2023 planner arrived yesterday, because
Wow.
I have to. I'm one of the, I got to think about my planners ahead of time. So I think I'm like, it's clearly already 2023.
I feel like that's what, like, a time traveler would tell us and want us to think, so
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. And yeah, this was a lovely way to spend part of my Saturday.
Well, wonderful. I really appreciate you having me as a guest, and, I'm just honored to be here, so thank you.
Thanks again to MA Dubs for joining me on the podcast. And I forgot to mention in the intro that you first heard her on the podcast on our bonus episode a few weeks back. So if you haven't heard that, that was a really fun little mini bonus episode to put together, and you should definitely go check it out and hear her other work. All right, next episode is November 1st with my friend Peter Schmidt. I recorded him and MA on the same day, and so I actually sort of feel like there's a lot of dovetail between these conversations that you will hear, and I hope you enjoy that. After that, I have one more guest definitely booked. It's going to be a great episode. I won't say who it is till after I record it. And I'm hoping to get one more person set up. I've reached out to them, and I'm just waiting for them to get back to me. And so I will have episodes through, I think, the end of November or the first week of December, and then I'm going to take the last bit of the year off. So we have, after this episode that I'm recording right now, we'll have hopefully 3 more, and we'll see how that goes. All right, again, if you want to support the show, you can buy me a coffee or share this with whoever you think might like it. And no matter what, thank you for listening.